Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. It was a special birthday for the missus last week, so I've been away for a couple of days, and the travel certainly knackered me out a bit more than expected. But I am back now and ready to roll. Today we are discussing the diplomacy of the Lord Commander Roboute Guilliman, the relations within the Imperium he is forced to manage. General spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from across the Warhammer 40k universe. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself, without spoilers. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. With the coming of the Emperor, the great unification of mankind began. When he deemed the time to be right, he commenced his unification of terror, before crusading out across the stars, determined to defeat the gods of chaos and enable mankind's evolution to a truly psychic race. While the Emperor's goal was a unified mankind, the truth is reunification could maybe be a more appropriate term, for the factions of humanity had long spread across the galaxy in ages past. And for every world or system that resisted this new Emperor, another welcomed it. Where the Emperor encountered tools he required, if he could, he would get it by diplomacy, preferring to embrace the various factions of mankind, then obliterate them. You need look no further than Mars for evidence of the Emperor's diplomacy, bartering an alliance between Terra and Mars that has become the very bedrock of the Imperium. The Mechanicus benefits from a large amount of independence, its forge worlds across the galaxy's sovereignty their own, defended by the Imperium of Man if the need arises, and in return the Mechanicum fuels the Imperium's war machine. It's an arrangement that has stood the test of time, and one that perfectly showcases the often overlooked side to the Emperor's expansion. 10,000 years later within the current Imperium, the task of defending the Empire falls to the returned Primarch, and in the face of Abaddon's success, his task could not be any greater. Yet still within this time of constant war, within this time of virtual darkness, he still has to manage those relations struck at the birth of the Imperium. And throughout the lore we've seen various different approaches that Guilliman takes in this regard, as well as reactions to it. Perhaps the most famous and obvious of these is his close working relationship with the Magos Belisarius Call. Now Call himself is nothing out of the ordinary, but his ambition is. Belisarius seeks nothing less than to be made Fabricator General, the head of the Adeptus Mechanicus. And to be fair to the man, you could well say he does deserve it. Single-handedly creating the Primaris project, the improvement of the Emperor's Adeptus Astartes template, as well as a whole host of other technological weaponry advancements. It could be argued it was Call who saved the Imperium, and not Roboute Guilliman. However, despite quite possibly being deserving of it, we have seen time and time again Guilliman refused to meddle within Mechanicus affairs. Within the Dark Imperium novel, we saw Call via his Call Inferior repeat his request once again that Guilliman install him as the new Fabricator General. And his argument is fairly persuasive for my mind. You replaced 5 of the High 12 upon assumption of the Regency of the Imperium, and hundreds of the lesser High Lords. In light of the treachery after you left, you did it again. What is one more? It's a fair argument from Call. There are none more powerful within the Imperium than the High Lords of Terror, and yet Guilliman pretty brutally cleaned house, replacing those who opposed him and his actions with those who didn't. Yet still, despite all of this, Guilliman remains clear to the sovereignty of the Mechanicus. For the 100th time, I will not do this. The Imperium does not exert so much control over Mars that I may appoint my own Fabricator General, and they would never accept you even if I could. The Mechanicum is fanatically loyal to the Omnissiah, the Emperor of Mankind, and it was he that ensured they would forever have their own right to rule, to govern their own worlds. While Guilliman's assertions of Call not being accepted by his brethren are more aimed at his personal philosophy, his experimentations, it is exactly right without that viewpoint, because any member appointed to be the new Fabricator General by the Imperium, not the Mechanicus, would face huge opposition, and most likely would plunge the Imperium and Mechanicus into civil war, shattering the alliance and union. Even the Emperor, the Omnissiah himself, would struggle to get away with that in my opinion, and I don't think the Emperor would even try. And it goes to show how easily this union could be shattered, one that's been integral to humanity's survival. Now it's interesting to wonder if Guilliman does truly believe he couldn't do it, or if it's simply a convenient excuse to deny Call, who Guilliman has secretly doubted his ambitions. Because as we said earlier, the Lord Commander did really take a bit of a sledgehammer to the existing High Lords of Terror themselves, the highest rule within the Imperium of Mankind. It would be absolutely fascinating to get a story on Mars's viewpoint and reaction to the return of Roboute Guilliman, how they saw events unfold on Terra, and any fears or doubts that they may have had in the Primarch, maybe cultivating in Guilliman's first official meeting with the Fabricator General. That would be an absolutely fascinating read. However, regardless, I do believe Guilliman believes in the Treaty of Olympus, the agreement signed by the Emperor and Mars, and that he, of all the possible brothers who could have returned, understands where he can push, where he can order, and where he can be forceful, and where he can't. And rather than being part of his intended gifts from the Emperor, I actually think he learnt this from his upbringing upon Macragge, from his foster father, Connor Guilliman. Now Connor was one of the two ruling consuls of Macragge, and it was through him that Roboute was brought up and educated on all manner of things related to ruling the people, from the skills of warfare to social care, to being a statesman and diplomacy. Guilliman of all the Primarchs was raised to be a statesman as much as a general, and we've seen further evidence of this throughout the lore. Another particular example is within the Dawn of Fire series novel The Wolf Time, where Guilliman needs the cooperation of the Space Wolves chapter. As Lord Commander of the Imperium, Imperial Regent and the voice of his father, Guilliman is completely within his right to order the Space Wolves to do what he says. But in knowing his brother Russ, in knowing the independent nature the Space Wolves always had, the role of executioner they value, and the sovereignty of Fenrisian territory, Guilliman instead uses the approach of diplomacy. Even after his emissaries and messengers had failed, Guilliman attended Fenris himself, meeting with the Great Wolf Logan Grimnar in person, and even bowing before the High King of Fenris. Now this is something Guilliman would never have done to his brother Leman Russ, something he knew he would never need to do. So the notion of him bowing to Logan Grimnar is almost comical, but it highlights the mind of Guilliman when it comes to these relationships, these matters of state that he has to deal with. Roboute knew full well the Space Wolves objected to any rule of his over them, and so he showed them the complete opposite. The Lord Commander of the Imperium, the Imperial Regent, bowing before the High King of Fenris. And he matched that clever maneuvering with his words, announcing he would ask no new oaths of loyalty, and he would ask nothing of the Great Wolf other than to prosecute the enemy as they always have, through a very public show of trust. I trust the Great Wolf of Fenris to do what is right, what is needed. I trust you, Logan Grimnar, because you have earned it with deeds for over half a millennium. I have a need, a very great need, for that leadership. So again, Guilliman is very adept and skilled at balancing and maintaining these relations throughout the Imperium, something that is absolutely a headache for him to have to do, when it would be far easier to simply issue orders. And perhaps sometimes Guilliman has still run the risk of doing just that. Within the novel Assassinorum Kingmaker, it's revealed the Officio Assassinorum have almost become resentful of Guilliman, under orders to press every assassin into active duty, something that's left them short in every regard, from intelligence to supplies to operatives themselves. However, while that is firmly an Imperial institution, we also see how one of the Knight Worlds of the Imperial Knight houses reacts to receiving Guilliman's orders. You know that 2 years ago we got an order to muster and follow you? And why haven't you? Because it was an order, not a request, Crane sneered. It's that damned Guilliman thinks he owns the galaxy, like we're all his vassals. In the old days, the Imperium remembered that we were allies, treaty partners. We are far older than they are. Hells, the lowest foundations of Gathering Palace were laid before the palace on Terra. They used to woo us, send diplomats. Now we simply get an astropathic communique saying we should rally our lances for war, not calling on our oaths of honour, but commanding us. So here, as part of a general muster of arms for one of Guilliman's Indomitus Crusade fleets, we have a world of Imperial Knights ignoring the call, due to what in truth is a matter of decorum, being ordered to come rather than requested. A few simple words. Now the truth is, this was most likely a message sent from any one of millions of adepts or servants, tasked with carrying out the reality of bringing all the required forces together. The Lord Commander most likely had nothing to do with the actual message that was sent. It was one of probably 1,000 messages that particular servant sent that day. But maybe therein lies the problem. Guilliman can't be everywhere at once. Or honestly, maybe he can't simply spare the time to cater to every world or faction that feels it deserves his attention. Indeed, one of the fellow nobles then argues back along those very lines. Lord Commander Guilliman is our ally, an ally in a difficult position, leading a fractious coalition with the galaxy torn in half. It is more than understandable he wishes to simplify some arrangements. Besides, his representative said nothing to me about changing the arrangements when I went to renew our oaths. This is a conversation most likely had on world after world across the Imperium. Knights' houses, forge worlds, worlds of the ecclesiarchy, all feeling that they answer to a higher power, or not the Imperium at all, that their bonds are a treaty, an alliance rather than servitude. With the current state of the galaxy, it leaves Guilliman in a very delicate position, where time is most definitely his enemy. One wrong word, tone of a message, order sent to the wrong system rather than a request, defying a treaty founded before Guilliman was even reunited with the Imperium. It could all cause him headaches he doesn't need, and more importantly troops he cannot spare. An Imperial Knight world refusing a call to arms could be the difference between a campaign succeeding or failing. A forge world could very well be the difference between holding a subsector or worse. These are the minefields that Guilliman must walk even as Lord Commander, and he still was most likely the best available Primarch for the job. But it's undoubtedly clear even he is struggling to contend with all the various factions out there, none more so than his Cold War of sorts with the ecclesiarchy. For the most part, Guilliman knows when and where he can spare the time to deal with these matters himself. An appearance here, a personal appeal there, but as time continues, as Chaos's advance rolls on, as the situation only continues to get worse, Guilliman's need for orders will only rise. As prideful nobles take offence to how calls to arms are worded, as the Mechanicus clings to its sovereignty, and the ecclesiarchy holds to its creed, as Imperial Regent's voice of the Emperor, does Guilliman have the reputation to order the previously uncommandable? Or are the frictions we already see within the Imperium only going to get worse? As always everyone, what do you think? As Lord Commander of the Imperium, is Guilliman doing the right thing to take the diplomatic stance where he can, approaching these various factions with words and requests rather than orders? Or considering the circumstances, should he be more direct, more forceful? Is the time of these political stances and games over for the Imperium? And that to survive, Guilliman simply doesn't have the time to cater to these various factions. Has the time come for the Lord Commander to take real control? Like me, do you feel that Guilliman was most likely the best brother to return to be able to deal with this system? Or maybe do you feel another Primarch would have been able to deal with it better, either more tactfully or forcefully? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too? But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.